Okay, we're going to take a look at code R102.7 existing structures. This is sometimes referred to as the grandfather code. What it says is that anything that was built before the code became into effect is allowed to remain. So what that means is that, like, suppose you have a house built in 1970. Whatever the codes were when that house was built, that house is allowed to remain without change. So just because they brought new codes into existence doesn't mean the owner of that house has to bring up the codes to the current status quo. Now, there are times when you do, and that's when you do renovation work. So code R102.7.1 refers to this. So if you do additions, alteration, or repairs to any structure, now it shall conform to the requirements of the new instructor without requiring the existing structure to comply. So let me explain this. Let's suppose you were remodeling the basement. You were doing a basement remodel, and during that process, you are working on a 1970s house. That basement needs to be brought up to the current codes because you're doing a renovation to that. But that doesn't necessarily mean that other parts of the home has to. Very rarely does the building code officer make other parts of the home come up to the current standards. Only the section for which you are doing the work. Now, that's not always true. There are some situations where they may make you add a couple smoke alarms or something because you're putting smoke alarms in a basement. They make you update the smoke alarms in the whole house. But under normal operating conditions, you only have to bring up to code for the part for which you're working with. All right, let's take a look at code R104.1. The building official shall have the authority to render interpretations of this code and adopt the policies and procedures in order to clarify the applications of its provisions. The interesting part is the authority to render interpretations. It's interesting because you can go to different areas with different building code officers and you can have different interpretations of the code. So it's interesting how you see codes are interpreted by different people. Because building codes are a complex subject and can be a little confusing, and how somebody interprets something could be slightly different. And interesting enough, there's no wrong answer as long as because the building code official has the ability to interpret it. He or she is allowed to do such thing. So just know that if you go from area to area, you are subject to their interpretation. Applications and permits. The building official shall receive applications, review construction documents, and issue permits for the erection and alteration of buildings and structures, inspect the premises for which such permits have been issued, and enforce compliance with the provisions of this code. One of the things that building code officials do is inspections. That's this code, R104.4 inspections. So the building official is authorized to make all the required inspections, or the building official shall have the authority to accept reports of inspections by approved agencies or individuals. Reports of such inspections shall be in writing and certified by a reasonable or responsible, officer of such approved agency or by the responsible individual. So inspections are part of the process where the building code official makes sure that the building is being built to the correct standards, and it is part of the process. I'll give you an example. If you were building a house and the first phase was to put in the footers, building code officer is going to come and want to inspect the footers before you pour your concrete. The next phase is to put up the basement walls, and the building code official is going to want to come inspect that process also. And again, once you start framing the house, the inspector is going to want to see the framing and is going to want to inspect it. So there's various inspections along the way, which the building code officer will make you aware of, and they will have to come and take a look at that building at that time. Okay, code R105.1 required. Any owner or authorized agent who intends to construct, enlarge, alter, repair, move, demolish, or change the occupancy of a building or structure, or to erect, install, enlarge, alter, repair, remove, convert, or replace any electrical, gas, mechanical, or plumbing system, the installation of which is regulated by this code, or to cause any such work to be done, shall first make application to the building official and obtain the required permit. So this is basically saying the owner that's going to do this work or an authorized agent, so that could be the contractor doing the work, has to make application for the permit before such work can begin. There are exceptions, emergency repairs, where somebody has to fix maybe a piece of plumbing to get a water leak fixed. That's one exception where you're allowed to make the repair before you get the permit. Okay, this is an interesting slide because this talks about liability. And interesting enough that you would think that the building code official holds some liability, but interesting enough, they hold very minimal liability in the process. So if a house was built and something went wrong, the homeowner actually doesn't sue the building code official. They sue the contractor because they hold the most liability. The only time that a building code official could be held liable is when they were acting in malice. If they were doing it intentionally, then the building code official can be held liable. So again, it's just important to understand where the liability is often held, and it's not typically the building code official. As long as they were acting in good faith and without malice, they're allowed to make mistakes. Interesting enough, though, the builder, oftentimes is the one that holds the liability for something that was built wrong or outside of the code. Okay, there is some work that's exempt from pulling a permit. There are things that we can do that doesn't always require a permit. Now, exempt from a permit is not being exempt from the building code. There is differences um, in that sentence. And what I mean by that is just because you don't get a permit for the work doesn't mean you don't follow the building codes when you build certain things. So even if you're not required to get the building permit, you're still required to build per code. Well, let's take a look at some of the things that are exempt. First of which is any one-story detached accessory structure used as tool and storage sheds, playhouses, and similar uses, as long as the area does not exceed 200 square feet. Just give you a little provision, a little warning. Sorry, not provision, but a warning. Not all areas follow the 200 square feet rule. Some have adopted the 1,000 square feet rule. They'll actually let you build up to 1,000 square feet without a building permit. But as a general rule, it is 200 square feet. Fences not over 6 feet high do not need a permit. Retaining walls that are not over 4 feet. Water tanks that do not exceed 5,000 gallons. Sidewalks and driveways do not require permits. Painting, papering, tiling, carpeting, cabinets, countertops, and similar finishes do not require permits. So most kitchen remodels can take place without a permit being required. A swimming pool less than 24 inches deep does not require a permit. Now, interesting enough, those ones that you see now that are inflatable, if they go over 24 inches, even though they're them inflatable, disposable $200 pools you get at Walmart, if they're over 24 inches, they're supposed to have a permit. Oftentimes people don't get a permit, but they're supposed to have a permit. Swings and other playground equipment, window awnings supported by the exterior wall, which do not project more than 54 inches. And number 10, decks not exceeding 200 square feet in area that are not more than 30 inches above grade at any point, are not attached to the dwelling They do not serve the exit door required by section R311.4, which is an egress door is what they're talking about there. So if you have a detached deck less than 200 square feet, less than 30 inches off the ground, that does not serve an egress exit door, you do not need a permit for that. Okay, the application for a permit. To obtain the permit, the applicant shall first file an applicant, therefore in writing, on a form furnished by the Department of the Building Safety for that purpose. Such applicant shall identify and describe the work, describe the land on which the proposed work is being done by legal description, street address, and similar descriptions that will readily identify and definitively locate the proposed building or work, indicate the use and occupancy for which the proposed work is intended, be accompanied by construction of documents and other information as required in section R106.1, state the valuation of proposed work. So you got to tell them how much it's going to cost. Just a little hint here, typically they want to know how much the work is going to cost or the valuation of the work, simply because they want to know how much to raise a person's taxes by. So that's definitely a connected issue there. So when you make a house more valuable in a community, the tax rates can and will often go up for that said house. Be signed by the applicant or the authorized agent. Give such other data information as required by the building